Namaste. Must be time to go live on another bicycle live stream on Saturday, the 26th of September at 7:08 a.m. What's it? 18. It's only 18 degrees. God, it feels nice. Nice spring morning. Been on the bike since before 5 a.m. So been up early on the bike. You got to get up early these days. Just ridden 36k. Just heading home from the markets, and yeah, it's looking like it's going to be a really nice, fine day today. So let's get into this morning's topic. And this morning's topic is the fatal factors attracting abusive relationships, or we could say emotionally abusive relationships if we wanted to. We could put that in there to be a bit more descriptive. So when I was at about 19 or so, I started having conversations with friends, female friends, and a common theme started to come up. They were complaining about their partners. And, I became a bit of a sounding board, I guess, in my, I guess I was the wise sage who would listen to them and give them advice, and I guess that's what I'm still doing. So, but I noticed this pattern of otherwise seemingly intelligent, attractive girls attracting men who, according to them, were not treating them very well. And, I noticed this for years and years, and I myself had not had a long-term relationship at that point. So I was just my experience was just going on what I was learning from these girls. And then when I was about 26, I got in my first long-term relationship for 4 years, and we lived together and ran a business together. And on the surface, it looked like things weren't too bad. We had our 2 dogs, 2 vegan dogs, nice big house on the acreage, business running from home, successfully, very, very successful business. And, it looked pretty impressive. New cars and motorbikes and, a lot of material stuff. But what I didn't realise was that I had subconsciously attracted the very thing that I could not understand when I would listen to these women, when they would tell me their woes about their partners. And I had actually subconsciously attracted a woman into my life at that stage who was emotionally abusive. But to be fairer, she was actually... The emotional abuse wasn't so bad in hindsight, it was the physical abuse. So I ended up in an abusive relationship for 4 years. And I've spoken about this before, so those people that follow my live streams regularly will know that I've mentioned this before, and I've mentioned that the end result of it all is that the woman in question actually became and is one of my best friends, which is an amazing turnaround, decades later. And she had a son who I get on incredibly well with. And she actually, ironically, became a Christian priest, or pastor, actually. So it's sort of amazing how, things can change. But at that stage, we were both young, mid-20s, and lacking that experience, although she had come out of a relationship. She'd come out of a long-term relationship. But, she was physically abusive, and it was not pleasant, and it was dangerous, and it was hard for me to tolerate. And, people say, when I look at people that are in abusive relationships and I say, why would you put up with it? And then I have to think and remind myself and say, well, Harry, you put up with it for 4 years. You lived with it for 4 years until that day you had that realization where you realized that no matter how much you provided for her, no matter how peaceful I remained when she got angry, she wasn't changing. And then I had that realization after that 4 years, and it was quite a dramatic realisation early one morning, like literally 5 o'clock in the morning, and that is the correct use of the word literal, by the way. Don't get me started on that. 5 o'clock one morning, we were having a fight, and she was actually throwing punches, and she's only a little girl, but, get angry, and I walked out of the house and she followed me down the long driveway, down to the quiet street in the acreage where we lived, and was throwing punches and I was holding my hands up, you know how you hold your hands up like that to block the punches. And she was hitting my hands so hard her fingernails were bleeding. So, give you an idea. And at that point, something in my mind just went, this can't work. You can't solve this problem. You have to walk away from this. And that was that point where I just went, wow. And I still remember, clearly saying, I can't do this anymore. There is something wrong with you. You need help. And that was, it was like the big, that was the end of it. I said, I'm over it. This is not happening anymore. And ironically, because of my love for her, I still supported her. She still stayed at my house until I found her a unit to move into. I helped her out in her further business ventures. So, and as I say, she became one of my best trusted friends, like a sister to me. So the question is, why do we tolerate it? And what are the two factors that attract emotionally abusive relationships? Now, I've had two other friends, one of which was actually an ex-girlfriend, who both of these friends ended up in abusive relationships, one of which to the point required hospitalisation several times, reconstructive surgery, facial surgery, broken ribs, things like that. And that's really, really, at that point, you should be running away from that situation. And yet, she persisted and kept going back. I asked her one day, one of my friends, this particular one that ended up in hospital a couple of times, I said, why? He could kill you at the rate he's going. He's a big boy. I said, why would you persist with this? And her excuse, and it was a justification, was, oh yeah, but he can be so nice. I said, no. I said, that's not him. That's him playing a role of pretending to be nice to keep you in the game, so to speak. Said he's not nice, obviously. He just does that for a while, and then you get to see the real side of him when he gets super angry and lashes out physically. And being a big boy, he does a lot of damage. One day she woke up, like I did, and removed all her stuff and went into sort of semi-hiding to get away from him. And my other friend that was an ex-girlfriend had to do a similar thing after a period of years with someone who also was emotionally abusive, very angry man. And it's interesting that he was, that particular guy actually died quite young. I say relatively young, in his mid-40s. So there's that anger component was not helping him in his health, but that's a whole different tangent. But in that particular case with my ex-girlfriend, after putting up with his emotional abuse and physical abuse for 3 years, she came back to me one day and she said just one word, and that was all I needed to hear. She just said sorry. Because, of what, I'm not going into the whole story here, but because of the fact that she'd left me for him and he had been such a poor choice and I'd been so devastated by it. So, okay, there are two factors, let's get on track here, that create these situations, subconsciously attracting these situations so that we're not consciously, deliberately trying to set ourselves up to fail. We're not consciously trying to put ourselves in a dangerous relationship where we might be abused emotionally or physically. But if we don't subconsciously change our patterning, we will continue to attract it. The pattern remains the same. It's just the person that we attract changes. So they don't change. It's just different people with the same attracted by the same pattern. So that's a better way of describing it. So the first thing is our self-worth. Now this is really, really crucial, critical subconscious pattern that is established primarily in the first 7 years of our our life when we're functioning in a theta state, and our subconscious is very impressionable. And we develop a lot of patterns in there, and we develop a feeling of self-worth depending on how our guardians, our parents, our significant people in our life have acted towards us, depending on the programming that they've thrown at us, which comes from them and how they feel about themselves. But we absorb it as our truth, and so we take it in as our reality, as our normal. So if we had supportive, loving parents that encouraged us to learn, to grow, to be better people, that enabled us to understand that we are loved, then we had a very good chance of putting a subconscious pattern in that was very positive, that would help us in later life, help us to achieve in a lot of areas because we feel loved. Conversely, if we had the opposite of that, if we had parents that themselves didn't feel loved or at a point of peace, if we had those sort of parents, then they would pass that on to us in their behaviour towards us, and they would say things that they would think they're encouraging us. You know, they would say, oh yeah, I'm helping, you know, my kid to do this, that, and the other. And they would actually believe it, but they're not. They're being condescending and critical in what they're educating their children with. And they're saying you'll never amount to much, and you've got to try harder, you've got to work harder, and you know you can't be weak, and all these sort of things. So that forms a pattern of a subconscious self-worth, and is the critical component in how we feel about ourselves. Now, it's very important to realize at this point that on a spiritual level, that despite that subconscious pattern, we can have a spiritual realization that we are unconditionally loved, an unconditionally loved child of the universe, and nothing we can do or say makes us unlovable in the eyes of the universe. So we can have that spiritual realization, because that's true self-worth. We are child of the universe, that is our worth. So when we actually accept that as a realization, as a truth, then this shifts any limiting self-worth ideas or patterns that we may have. So the second factor, because there are two main factors that I'm going to talk about, and I won't go too much longer on this. Second factor is, it's tied in with the first factor, depending on our level of self-worth, it will determine our need for attention. And this becomes not only a self-fulfilling prophecy, but an energetic attractant. So if we have a low level of self-worth, we tend to, connected with that, we tend to have a very strong need for attention. And that tends to mean that we will attract energies that we would repel or distance ourselves from if we had a higher self-worth, and we will tolerate or put up with being treated in ways that are not acceptable. No one deserves to be mistreated, but if we only feel we're worth 10 or 20% instead of understanding that we're worth 100%, then we will just put up with any shit, because we have such, as all of us do, such a strong need for love, such a strong need for attention, that any attention that comes our way becomes something that we just have to hang on to, because we don't think we're worth much. We don't think we're going to get anyone or anything of any great value in our life. So we'll just put up with any crap that comes our way. So I hope this gives you something to think about. And I also recommend, actually, in relation to this, listening to Dr. Bruce Lipton's honeymoon effect. Morning! Listening to Dr. Bruce Lipton's honeymoon effect videos, or reading the book, which will help you understand this better. He explains it beautifully. I'll probably post his video as well. And to help you understand a little bit more about the subconscious patterning and how it can be reprogrammed. And I'm just adding in the more spiritual sides of self-worth and how it all connects together. So remember, you are an unconditionally loved child of the universe. And the universe, God, loves his children the same way that a parent loves their children and wants them to be safe, loved, protected, all of the things that encompasses love. And so remember, that is your true worth. When you remember that's your true worth, if you attract subconsciously somebody in your life that mistreats you, you then to call it quits, to very, very assertively but friendly. I mean, assertive is strength, but done in a friendly, compassionate way. To assertively say, no, I won't be spoken to this way. No, I won't be treated this way. Not doing it in an egotistical way, doing it in a way that comes from true worth. I hope you understand the difference there. So, hope you have a great spring day. Live vegan and save lives. And I'll speak to you tomorrow if the weather's fine. Ahimsa.